Chapter 15. Sounds of danger shrieked inside him. The snake was gigantic, its body a deep red color, the same width as Iba's body. Iba clawed at the snake, her eyes wide with fear, but it only tightened around her, pinning one of her arms to her body. "Issachar!" she screamed. Ben reached her first and pulled at the heavy coils of the snake, beating it with his staff and scratching at its scales. Issachar was right behind him, and at her touch the snake froze for a moment, then continued its slow crushing of their sister. Issachar was gasping and crying, and Ben felt like throwing up, shaken by the deep evil he sensed. This wasn't an ordinary snake. There was a sudden fluttering, and the three Othra dropped to the ground in front of Iba and the snake. Tears of relief came to Ben's eyes when he saw them, but though they flapped their wings and pushed at the snake with their claws, it didn't release his sister. She was unconscious now. From lack of breath or fear, Ben didn't know which. "Jabari and Gavi will be here soon," Ephir said, her voice strained from the effort of beating at the snake with her wings. And sure enough, the grain swayed like the passage of another snake as the two older boys crashed through it. After a moment, Jabari and Gavi broke onto the road, their eyes widening in shock as they saw what was happening. "Gavi!" Jabari shouted, and Gavi leapt to Iba's head, whispering to her. "Stand back," Jabari said to Ben and Issachar, and they obeyed, Ben weak with relief. He wondered what was taking Jabari so long until Jabari suddenly jumped at the snake and grabbed its head with both hands. The snake tried to bite him, but he held its jaw tight, the muscles in his arms straining. He reached back swiftly and pulled an arrow out of his quiver. Then, with one smooth arc, he plunged it into the snake's eye. The snake jerked back as steaming black blood fountained out of its head, covering Jabari. The snake collapsed, and then, to Ben's shock, evaporated. Gavi sat on the ground beside Iba and laid both hands on her head. He sang to her, something with words about the grass needing the sun to return and dry the dew off it. And as he sang, she smiled, and Gavi stroked the tendrils of hair that had escaped her braids, smoothing them off her face. He bent and kissed her forehead, then stood with her in his arms. She was tiny compared to him. "She'll be fine," he said. He injected a lot of fear into her, but he didn't stop her heart. Just the words "stop her heart" made the earth wobble under Ben's feet. He reached for his sister, and Gavi gently placed her in his arms. Ben closed his eyes and laid his forehead against hers. The heavy, jarring drums inside him were silent, and a single sweet song curled around his rib cage. He breathed relief and joy. He, too, could sense that Iba would be fine. He looked up. Issachar stood next to him, arms wrapped around her stomach, staring at Iba's face. He saw the streaks that tears had made on his older sister's cheeks, and he moved closer to her. Issachar reached out and grasped Iba's hand. A breeze whipped at Ben's clothes, and he looked up to see the Othra flying closer, flapping their great wings. They landed nearly on top of Ben and Issachar, and Ben heard something new coming from them. It wasn't fearful or twisted like the drums of doom, but it was strong and not entirely comfortable. A warning. Ben waited for them to speak, not sure that he wanted to know what they would say. Neril gazed at Benaim, and Issachar took a step closer to him. "In the great lands of Moween, it is forbidden to raise a weapon to a friend," Neril said, "and these are undoubtedly your friends, though they can be blind, even stupid at times." Behind Neril, Issachar saw Jabari scowl, and she nearly giggled, shocked at the lightness of her heart. "Jabari is still very young, and he does not see that you three are essential in the great story of our world. He cannot see far, for he has the gift of protection, and he thinks only of protecting the land from impulsive people." Issachar felt heat come into her face at being described as impulsive, at the same time that Jabari said, "I can hear you, you know. I'm standing right here." This time a giggle did escape her. She quickly made her face serious when Ephir began to speak. Her melodic voice was more gentle than Neril's, making Issachar feel 1,000 times worse and better. "Unlike these children, we see far, and we can tell there is more than impulse drawing you, young one." She looked at Issachar. "Your gifts are great. We have convinced Jabari to return to help you." She paused, and the air filled with warm humor. "It took some pressure to convince him." The Othra were laughing, and Gavi pressed his lips together to keep from smiling. Jabari rolled his eyes. Issachar was shocked to see that the Othra could laugh. Was nothing serious in this land? Even the wisest of creatures acted like children. Issachar was accustomed to gloom. Her face ached from the unfamiliar amount of smiling she had done in the last 2 days. "You will make peace," Neril said, "and then you will continue on to find your brother." There was silence. Ben spoke first. "I'm sorry for raising my staff," he said, heaving a great sigh. He looked down at Iba, who lay in his arms with her eyes closed. "Thank you with all my heart for saving my sister. We were angry, but we weren't ready to be alone." Jabari looked up. "I forgive you, and I am sorry for saying unkind words." He turned and winked at Issachar. "I came back because I can't have you tearing through my land," he said to her, "breaking things down with no one to help you." She bristled, then settled, as Ifir opened her wings the slightest bit. It appeared that she wasn't going to get much more of an apology than that, but she knew she had been impulsive, no matter her reasons, and she nodded. When he reached out to grasp her hand with both of his, she frowned slightly. It was unfamiliar to her, but she followed suit and closed her hands around his. She felt a shock of connection when their hands met, and she pulled back and looked at Gavi rather than meet Jabari's eyes. Gavi held his hands out to Issachar as Jabari moved on to Ben. Gavi's hands felt happily normal, with no spark, and Issachar smiled at him. He did a little step dance and tugged on one of her braids. "I'm glad we're all back together, like tea and sugar," he said. "I'm glad too," Issachar said in a loud whisper. "But don't tell him." She pointed at Jabari. Gavi grinned, and at the sight of his smile, Issachar's shoulders relaxed. Just then she heard Iba's soft voice. "I'm thirsty," Iba said, her eyes open, and Issachar jumped to give her a drink of water. Ben set the little girl down on her feet and waited until she was steady before he let her go. "How do you feel?" Ben asked. "I feel okay," she said, gazing up at Jabari and Gavi with big eyes. She smiled and jumped up and down before running to Jabari, who picked her up and swung her around. She was so small that she looked like she weighed nothing when he picked her up. "You came back," she said breathlessly when he put her down. She ran to throw her arms around Gavi's waist. "You came back." Jabari met Issachar's eyes then and smiled a small smile. He nodded at her, correctly interpreting what she was feeling. "Let's go find your brother," he said. They walked until the sun had set and there was almost no light left, then put their mats beside a great tree in a field. Gavi laid out 3 meat pies, and Issachar's mouth fell open. "The woman at that last house gave them to me this morning," he said. "She told me to save them for dinner. They might be a little banged up, but seekers can't be choosers." He pressed at one of the pies to make it round again, but it broke apart, and he grimaced. Guess that one's ours, Yab," he said. "I'll share with you," Iba said. "I don't eat much." "And I eat a lot," Gavi said, "so that makes us a perfect pair." Jabari, Ben, and Issachar shared the remaining 2 pies, each of them taking bites until there was nothing left but crumbs. Issachar sighed with contentment, then remembered something. She narrowed her eyes at Jabari. "Did he just call you Yab?" she asked. Jabari flinched. "Yes, it's a sort of nickname." "Does everyone call you Yab?" "No," he said, shooting Gavi a warning look as Gavi laughed quietly to himself. "Only Gavi, because he's annoying." "You love me," Gavi said, and winked at Iba. She smiled up at him, and the happiness in her face was almost more than Issachar could bear. There were too many things warring in Issachar. Happiness, contentment, worry, fear. Her eyes brightened when Gavi pulled out a flask of tea, though. She pushed worry down. They would find Kital, and he would not believe himself abandoned for long. "How do you know each other?" she asked. They seemed so different. Jabari and Gavi exchanged glances. "We went to school together," Jabari said finally, "and somehow I got stuck with him as a seeking partner." Gavi only shook his head, grinning and refusing to rise to the bait. It didn't really satisfy Issika's curiosity about them, but Jabari didn't go into it more. What was school like for the Mawil, she wondered. Their camp was close to a small creek. Issika took Iba, and the two of them bathed as well as they could, ducking in and out of the cold water, then pulling their dusty clothes back on. Issika took the braids out of her sister's hair and smoothed the curls down with water, braiding it again. She did the same with her own hair, then wiped some dried mud off Iba's shirt and looked into her eyes. Iba looked back at her, biting her fingers. "I love being with our new friends," Iba whispered, "but I'm worried that we won't find Kital." "Shh," Issika said to her. "Don't worry, love, of course we will. Does Jabari seem like someone who can't find even the smallest thing that he wants to find?" Iba thought it over, then shook her head, blinking tears out of her eyes. She smiled, her dimple flashing, before skipping off to the others, pausing to touch each of the trees she passed. Issika watched her, wondering absently if her little sister felt anything in the trees. She didn't know how to ask, so she merely followed Iba and lay beside her, falling asleep immediately. When Issika awoke in the pink light of the morning, she saw that Gavi had laid a fire and was boiling water. He scooped several large spoonfuls of coffee into the water, then strained it through a cloth into 5 small metal cups. Issika took one and lifted it to her nose, sighing. "How many amazing things do you have in that bag?" she asked. "Lemons, tea, now coffee?" Gavi laughed. "I panic if I think I won't have hot drinks nearby," he said. "Jabari's always going through my bag before we set off, trying to get rid of things I want to bring. But he's always happy to have them in the end." Issika hadn't known how happy good food and the expectation of good food could make her. To wake up knowing she would eat, that the hollow feeling would go away, it was incredible. They started out soon after eating. Breaking camp was becoming routine as they each found a job and did it quickly. They walked for most of the day, hiking along the road with endless fields on either side of them. First grain, then tall tomato plants, then berry bushes. They saw other farms in the distance, but none of them called to Issika, and she couldn't see any walls. She was glad. She didn't know whether she'd be able to ignore the tugging, and she wanted to respect the seekers and their work in Mawin. Sometime in the late afternoon, Jabari fell into step beside Issika. They walked in silence while Issika tried to stop feeling so awkward beside him. She looked down at his hands, swinging by his sides. He walked with long strides, his shoulders back, somehow relaxed and focused at the same time. He rolled when he walked, like a large cat. His walk was distinctive. She felt that she would know who he was from a long way off. She looked away when he glanced at her, embarrassed to be paying so much attention to him. Issika thought about what she knew she needed to say to get rid of the awkwardness between them. Finally, she forced it past her lips, despite the churning in her stomach. She longed for some of the feeling of well-being that the Othra spread, but they were nowhere to be seen. Come to think of it, she hadn't seen them since the night before. She cleared her throat. "I wanted to say thank you," she began, "for taking us in and helping us find our way. I don't know what we would have done without you." "Nothing, I guess. We probably would have wandered in circles until we died." Jabari laughed, a rich, surprising sound. "Somehow I doubt that." But Issika had broken the ice and the conversation flowed. "How did the Othra convince you to come back to us?" she asked. Jabari smiled. "Do you really want to know?" "Of course." Nero picked me up with his talons and put me in a tree, higher than I've ever climbed, he said. He wouldn't let me down until I promised to return. Even then, he left me there for a while, I suppose to teach me a lesson. You're kidding me. No, I'm telling the truth, he said, and he showed her the talon marks in his shirt. Did it hurt? Only a little, he said, and shrugged. The Othra are ancient and wonderful, but dangerous, and they're harder on me than they are on most people. Why? He shrugged. They know I'm excellent at everything, so they have to push me. Behind them, Gavi made a sound like he was choking, and Jabari grinned to let her know he was teasing. Issachar wondered, though, why would they be harder on him? Did they think he was arrogant as well, or was there something in him they felt they needed to push? The road left the fields and became lined with trees. These were trees that Issachar had never seen before, and as she peered up to see them better, Jabari reached out and broke a piece of fruit off one of the branches above them. Try it, he said, pulling the fruit in half and offering a piece to her. It's called ringu, or traveler's fruit, because it grows on the trees we plant along the roads. The fruit was very bright pink and oblong. Issachar lifted it to her mouth and took a small bite. Juice ran down her hand and arm to her elbow. The ringu fruit tasted bright and soft, like melon, but with some spice. Gavi picked one for Iba, and Ben jumped up and plucked his own off a branch. They ate as many as they could fit into their stomachs, and when they finished, they were bright pink from the fruit's juice, but refreshed. Gavi poured water into their hands so they could wash. They walked on. Jabari whistled a song for some time, and when he stopped, Issachar saw from the corner of her eye that he was looking at her silently. She waited. I was thinking, he said finally, that I haven't heard anything about how you came to be with the Poisonlanders.